Welcome to Derry has 4 episodes now. I wanted to wait until a little bit more of the show had been done before I started to put my thoughts out there about it. But for me, I kind of felt the same way for every episode from 2 on, and there's only 6. The show, for me, primarily ranges from kind of just gross to pretty boring. It's very competently made. I thought the scene at the end of episode 1 was very good. Definitely the highlight of the show for me. But beyond that, it's just been kind of a lot of day-to-day stuff that's supposed to be weird and creepy. And then you get a bunch of weird forms of Pennywise being tentacle monsters and shit with pregnant women and eyeballs and just gross stuff that's not super fun to watch. It's also set in the 1960s, which obviously allows them to talk about the political issues that they want to talk about where it makes sense in the story, but they also very clearly think it's reflective of America today still. And that aspect is really getting ramped up as the season goes on. Episodes 3 and 4 got progressively more annoying. Episode 4 in particular really leans into everything just being the fault of white people and how bad they all are. I guess I'll give them credit that they're actually starting to put shows and movies in places where racism makes sense, like the 1960s America. You saw this in Sinners, which is supposed to be like 100 years ago in the Deep South, but they also very clearly mean it as a commentary on the US right now. So while it has more story justification, I still find it to be obnoxious. And I don't know if they couldn't afford Bill Skarsgård for the whole season or what, but through 4 episodes, we've got nothing but a blurry picture of a clown. Maybe he'll show up in these last 2. And I know Pennywise is an interdimensional being and can be whatever, but him in his clown form is the symbol of the It movies and book and everything else. It is annoying we're just getting all this weird, gross tentacle shit instead. The gist of the plot is that the US military is trying to capture Pennywise and weaponize it because fear is the greatest weapon that we can have against the enemy and blah, blah, blah. So that plot is mainly tied to Hanlon and Dexter's dad. Obviously, Dexter's dad is in charge. Hanlon works for the U.S. military. Him and his wife and kid moved to Derry for this project. They have this guy, Halloran, who is a psychic and can hack into people's minds. So they're using him to try to find Pennywise. Hank Grogan was arrested for the murders that Pennywise committed in episode 1. Obviously, this is the subplot to complain about American rights and black people being falsely arrested and treated unfairly by the justice system. This also ties in because his daughter is friends with Hanlon's son and a couple other kids. So they're all looking for Pennywise, trying to figure out what's going on. And of course, you find out that he's having an affair with a white woman. I don't know if we'll get some kind of Emmett Till reference, especially given the era that this is in and the situation. I wouldn't be surprised. Hanlon's wife is a civil rights activist, so she's willing to fight for Hank's freedom and use all the activist organizations. But Hanlon just wants to do his job and be recognized in the military, so he's trying to get her to cool it. There's a little bit of drama between the kids and kind of awkward school shit. But honestly, plot-wise, there's not a ton going on. You've got the kids looking for Pennywise to get Hank free because they blamed him for the murders because he did it. The military is trying to find Pennywise to weaponize him. And the American Indian tribe that's from the area views themselves as kind of responsible for keeping Pennywise caged up. So they want the military to leave. And it's sort of doing the thing where they've got so many plot lines that none of them are particularly developed or interesting. They each kind of progress like 5-10 minutes each episode, maybe. Some of that time is used for weird, creepy horror stuff. Some is used to get backstories and that type of thing. But there's not a ton that they've done because once they find Pennywise, that's kind of it, pun intended. And I think that's why the show is only 6 episodes, but I think it really could have used a bit more focus. In episode 4, we get one girl trying to cut her eyeballs off because she's hallucinating them popping out of her head. Pretty gross. Obviously, the girl that tries to help her is the one that's been in an institution before and gets caught red-handed as far as the other students are concerned because they already think she's crazy. We get Pennywise's whole origin story. We get to see Hanlon's wife enable activist mode. It's just kind of a lot of meandering, drawn out plots about characters that I don't find particularly interesting. And it's a shame because it is competent. They built this whole set that holds water and is pretty neat for Pennywise's intro through one of Halloran's visions. The behind the scenes stuff is interesting, but then we find out Pennywise's whole origin story is the American Indians were keeping him caged up, and of course the white colonizers let him go free. So the American Indians buried a bunch of shards from the meteor that brought Pennywise in around this forest, and he was contained just to the forest. And it's hilarious because in this flashback, all of the American Indians are just run by women. They're the ones hunting Pennywise. They're the ones who are the warriors and mother figures of the tribe. It's just all the typical bullshit you see from Hollywood these days. But of course, thanks to their strong female leader, they were able to bury the 13 shards and restrict his movement. And I don't know how much of this is from the book or how much the show is just kind of doing what they want. I've heard in the book that Pennywise and the whole Earth dimension are on the back of some giant interdimensional turtle or something, and Pennywise can go between both or some crazy shit. I don't really need to know his backstory. I think it's perfectly fine to just have him be a weird clown who needs people to be more afraid to eat them, so he kind of fucks with them and then eats them. I'm perfectly fine not getting the Pennywise origin story. And maybe it's ridiculous to complain about psychic powers in a movie about an interdimensional organism that eats children. But I think it's a weird thing to bring in, because then you kind of have to bring in, why did we have humans with psychic powers in the 60s and they're just gone? Like, even if Halloran himself dies at the end of the season, you would think that the government would have other psychic people, or that they would just be around in general. So there's some weird world building stuff that you had him caged up for millions of years, and that his comet was like a prison. And the shame of it is if you're going to say that he landed here millennia ago or millions of years ago or whatever you want to say, you could literally put his story in any era. You could kind of have him roam the entire world if you want to. He can take other forms. He can do illusions. You don't even really have to limit it to where he's stuck in Derry for multiple centuries. It's kind of a Predator type thing where it'd be pretty neat to see Pennywise in like the Japanese samurai era of society, way more low tech, different culture. You could have him in the Middle East and they think he's some kind of demon because of their own religious beliefs. You could have him in South America with the Aztecs. You could have him in America just a long time ago with the American Indians and see how they deal with it. There's kind of limitless potential if you're going to give him this backstory. And they just chose to go back one 27-year stint in the same town. And because people forget about Derry when they leave, we could end up where all the characters die. We could end up where none of them die and they all just leave town and forget. So you're kind of setting up a prequel story that you're just going to hit the reset button on anyway. So it just kind of seems like a decision that they didn't really take advantage of the potential for. But now that they've done this, they've locked in his whole story. So he came to Earth and has only been in this one tiny ass town his whole time. I'm not going to keep going. It's a very forgettable but competent show. The horror aspect is mainly just gross to me and not really working. The characters are so forgettable. I'd be surprised if you asked people who are watching this show what all the character names were, if they could even name them all. I think not having Pennywise in his kind of iconic form for most of the show is also a huge mistake. And this show could literally just be called anything, and they could make the monster just any generic shapeshifter and not much would change. So I'm not a huge It fan. I don't really like horror in general, but even still, this is just kind of a meh show. I'd be pretty shocked if anyone was still talking about this show at all by the time 2026 rolls around in about a month. Here's a nice shot of your American Indian female warrior crew. But yeah, kind of a bummer because it is well made. The writing's okay. It just is what it is. I don't have too much else to say about it. I'll just leave it here for this one. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. Try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.